Well, good morning, everybody. Good to be here. Except I have no audio. Why do I have no audio? It's doing it again. No audio. Why do I have no audio? How about now? Let's see if it loads. It's gonna load. You can hear me. Well, it's not registering on the. T- yep, there it goes. There you go. Sorry about that. That's on me. That was on me. Hold on a second. Yep, sorry. The device I use actually has three different um, indicators as to what is being shown on the screen, and I was using the wrong one. So that's on me. I had the wrong setup. So, all right, good to be here with you today. Thank you all for being here as a part of the program. This is From the Deep End. We study the Bible here together on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Currently, we are in a study of the book of Hebrews, just getting started with that, and looking forward to having that good discussion here today. I got several people starting to pop in there. Appreciate y'all's comments already coming in. I do try to pay at least some attention to those. Any Bible thoughts, any Bible questions you have on your mind, or other topics are viable as well. But anything you want to talk about, let me know. Be glad to um, stop and see what I can do for you, especially if it's a Bible related one. We'll go from there. But I see we got Jenny, David. Hey, David, you sent me a text last night. Until I saw your name, I hadn't thought about that text that you sent me last night about that book, which I had not looked at yet. I will try to remember to do that before we get after we get off the program. Sorry about that. I have, you know, my phone and I, once I'm not at the office, do not exist in the same universe. It gets put down on the table or a counter somewhere, and I leave it. I do not like carrying my phone around with me. It goes away. So I am not a phone person except when I'm at work because then I have to be a phone person. But anyway, but I'll try to remember to get that. But I did see it come through there. Tevin, good to see you. Mercy, Shauna, who else is there? Andy, obviously, appreciate that. And that's the same girl. All right, but good to have you all with us. So whatever's on your mind, feel free to go ahead and pop that in, and we'll talk about it as we have opportunity. But barring that, we're going to just jump right back here into the study of Hebrews together. And here we are in Hebrews chapter 1. Uh, we're probably going to get actually quite a few verses done today, I think, because the last section of Hebrews 1 is a sequential quoting of different Old Testament passages to make the point that the Hebrews writer is trying to get made um, in the opening of the book here. There you go, Tevin. But we'll get to that in just a minute because we got a question from Tevin. Let's see what that is. What we got here, man? What prompted you to start asking the question, what is the other option of the biblical text, particularly when it comes to Paul's writings, um, teaching the Bible? That's what started prompting me to ask the question because, and oftentimes, for those who've been in the class for a while, you've heard me ask the question to you a lot, and it is especially relevant to the writings of Paul because you've also heard me say, I don't know how many times, there's a 97% chance, and again, a number I just make up, that what Paul is writing about is Judaistic, the doctrine of the Judaizers, which is based upon the Pharisaical doctrine, Acts 15:5, of their history, of their past, which is based upon the elemental spirit of the world principle that they use to understand understand the Old Testament and understand God and themselves. So it's all written about the same thing, and that's the way I teach it. And I think I have gotten more precise in the way I teach it in recent years, right or wrong, for good or ill. I have, um, but the realization over the years of teaching that I think most people study their New Testament and study their Bible as a whole, but especially the New Testament. They study the Bible as a whole. Let me say it this way. Here's a good way of saying it. I think because as I said, especially the New Testament, when you're dealing with Israel in the Old Testament, when they depart from God, where does Israel go? This is actually a pretty good question to get started with, Tevin. When they depart from God, where does Israel go? It's in the Ten Commandments. It's all throughout the book of Deuteronomy. It's cyclical throughout the book of Judges. Where do they go? Well, they turn to idolatry. Excuse me. They turn to the idolatry of the nations, the Canaanite nations that they were supposed to conquer and drive out. Um, they turn to the Phoenician gods. Okay, you have Baal and you have Baal and so on, and eventually you get Molech. They turn to idolatry, and so when you read about, I don't know, let's go to close down some of these here that I had open. How about Ezekiel? Ezekiel 16, is that what I want? Israel's the face, the Israel, Judah at this point is the faithless bride. Son of man, make known to Jerusalem her abominations. Your origin and your birth are of the land of the Canaanites. Your father was an Amorite, and your mother a Hittite. Okay, this is a talking here about Jerusalem and the nature of the cities. By the time you get to the time of Ezekiel, is they have just departed into that land, into that into the gods of that land, and that's the way they were living. That's the way they did. Okay, so when we study the Old Testament and somebody departs from God, they're departing to idolatry, paganism. All right, and when you've studied your Old Testament for that long, and then you come to the New Testament and um, you get to Hebrews for First Timothy chapter 5, for example, where um, well, this works, but if any man does not provide for his relatives, especially for the members of his own household, he's denied the faith and he's worse than an unbeliever. Okay, so where do we have that person going? See, we almost always study it as if go back up to First Timothy 4. Is that what I want? Spirit expressly says that in the latter times some will depart from the faith. Well, where are they going to? See, we have them going back into idolatry. That's the path. We think they are departing from the faith, from the gospel, to go to Roman paganism. And certainly as the church ages, that's actually, you study church history, that's actually what begins to happen. Yes. But in the New Testament, that's almost never the case. Almost never the case. And this is a good thought to have as we study the book of Hebrews together. Okay? Because when we get down here into Hebrews chapter 2, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? That's 2 verse 3. Okay? How are they neglecting the salvation and where are they going? Well, they're not going to paganism. They're not following Roman or Grecian structure for religion. They're not even going to Canaanite structure for religion like they did in the Old Testament. Where are these Hebrews going? These Hebrews are Christians. And guess what they're going to? They're going back to Hebrews, Hebrewism, Judaism. That's where they're going. Okay? And I don't think that most people, as they study their New Testament, understand the ramifications of that. They study the New Testament almost immediately as when somebody departs the faith, they are becoming a humanist, a secularist, a hedonist. Maybe they're becoming an idolater, going down the path of polytheism or something of that nature. And yeah, again, you'll get that begins to pop up in some of the writings. So it's not like it was unheard of, but the vast majority of times it's a comparison between Christianity and Judaism, especially the Judaism of the Judaizers. Okay, that's what it is. And Tevin, to actually get to the point is, the more it dawned on me that people study the New Testament as if the other option is atheism, and that's effectively what we do with it. It's you're either Christian or you're an unbeliever. You're an agnostic, atheist, humanist, whatever. And that's how we study and so therefore interpret and apply the New Testament. And so in recent years, that's where I've just started asking the question, well, what's the other option? If you're not going to do it this way, what? And so that, yeah, at least I hope it is helpful to make people at least stop and think for a second about what was the context within the first century. So that's where it came from. It was never a personal question in that regard, um, because at least the way my brain works, once I can tell you the passage which did it for me the best. It's the one I keep referencing every time I talk about it. It's the one that got highlighted here in blue in Acts chapter 15 and verse number 5. I don't remember, this was years ago. I don't remember when it first clicked with my brain that the Judaizers, we always, because my dad was real good about talking about the Judaizers, and that is a variation of an a transliteration of a word that does appear. What's that in Galatians? Is it Galatians 2 or Galatians 3? That word appears. The Judaizing teacher is actually it's a transliteration of a Greek term. Okay, we talked about that when we studied Galatians. I just off the top of my head, I can't remember what verse that's in. I want to put it in chapter 3, but um, so when I was growing up, I heard all about the Judaizers. I heard all about circumcision and so on. Yeah, because that's what the book of Galatians is about. You can't hard to study that. Okay. And then one day I was reading through Acts 15 and I read that right there and it clicked in my brain. Well, these are Pharisees. Okay, great. Well, that makes an immediate and direct connect. The Judaizers are Paul. Paul would have been a Judaizer because he's a Pharisee. And that was the beginning point for me of defining, and I guess I sort of began to ask the question of myself, well, what's the other option? I never phrased it that way to myself. But this is the verse. And that's why I got it highlighted there in blue, because in my brain, that's an important verse. Now, there are other ways of doing it, but that's the one that clicked with me. Um, and then as we studied through Galatians together and all that, it's the comparison between, we went to Mark 7 a bunch. Mark 7 and the traditions of the elders and all of that connected to relying on the works of the law in Galatians. And once you start piecing that together, the Bible gets a whole lot easier. It just gets a whole lot easier. So anyway, that's what I do with it. What you got there, Tevin? Um, it's been absolutely game changing for me to properly to me properly understanding the books allows me to understand the problems that are being addressed by the writer. It was that way for me too. And you know, to the degree that I'm to the degree that my thinking about it is right, I let other people have that thought about it. I hope it's right. I think it's right. That's why I have that thought, because it seems valid in my brain. Um, but if it is right, if it's even partially right, as you say, it's a game changer. It was a game changer for me as well, because it will change the way you approach the New Testament. And more importantly, it changes the way you end up applying the New Testament and the way you conceive of your own Christian life. So that's where I go with it. So anyway, appreciate the question. Let's turn our attention back here to Hebrews. Um, excuse me there for a second. We talked about the first 3 or 4 verses here in the last couple of classes. Okay. We spent a lot of time on today's Thursday, right? On Tuesday, um, talking about the creating of the world and the upholding of the universe here in Hebrews 1, connected to that same appearance of that language over here, understanding the universe was created by the Word of God. Okay. And then the same word over here in Acts, or chapter 9, rather, excuse me, 9, verse number 26, um, that he appeared once at the end of the ages to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Okay. This is a comparison of the Greek word. It's a different translation of the Greek word ion or eon, whichever way you want to pronounce that, era, um, compared to just the appearance of the word pos, which is the Greek word for all or every. And translations, as we spend a lot of time talking about, are not consistent in their translations of these words. Um, Sometimes they translate the word, because like the word here, ion, is the word age. Okay. In chapter 11, if I remember correctly, if I'm doing this right, Acts 11:3, the word ion is translated universe. And then back here in Acts chapter, I keep saying Acts, I'm sorry, because I was in Acts 15 a second ago. Pretty much, unless I turn to the book of Acts, if I say Acts for the rest of this class, I mean Hebrews, because once I start doing that, I can't seem to make myself stop. So if I say Acts and you think I'm in Hebrews, I probably am in Hebrews. I'm going to try my best not to do that again. But back here in Hebrews chapter 1, um, the the word universe here is not the word ion, it's the word pos, which means all or every. But the word world up here is the word ion. Okay. I own actually, but ion. Okay. So ion is translated world, it's translated age, and it's translated universe. Okay. But then you have the word pos, meaning all or everything, translated universe, which is he's also the heir of all things. So that's the word pos as well. So you have a translational challenge right there. And I don't fault the translations. I think I said this Tuesday by way of review, but it's not that these are bad translations, because those words can mean all of those things. Okay, that this is not a translational error here. The translators are in a bit of a difficult spot there in terms of doing it. Now, they are trying to create a translation which is reliable. It is a reliable translation, but it does also have to be readable, because you got to read it. And so that's probably why, on some level, you get a different translation of these terms, but they're doing that somewhat interpretively based upon the context of the passage. So it's a difficult thing to do a translation, but that's why it's at least important to be able to pull up a Strong's Concordance and look at things. Okay. Um, so what is the meaning of all of this? We talked about the dispensational views versus the preterist views and so on. I kind of lean toward a preterist view here, at least in the opening chapter here. That's where I think this is going. I don't think the creating of the world here is Genesis chapter 1. Now, it starts in Genesis chapter 1, yes, because that is the beginning. And the age, because this is plural, if I remember correctly, he created the ions. That's not how you do that in Greek, but that's the ion, eon. So the era is now eras. It is plural. Okay. So if you want to use the word world for ion, perfectly good translation, it's plural. Why did they not translate it and he created the worlds? That I don't understand. That one I don't understand. Why did you take the plural ion and create it with a singular world. See, to me, that to me is a translational error, but I think it's a translational error based upon the doctrinal background that they're the contextual slash doctrinal background they're trying to give to it. All right. So, but because it's plural, he created the ages, which when they translated ages down here in 926 of Hebrews, when they get that one, at the end of the ages, there's our word ages, and that's the word ion, and it is again plural. So when they translate it ages, they get the plural right. But when down here in 11.3, universe, and I'm pretty sure that's plural as well. I'll make sure I'm right. Yeah, that's plural as well. They went universe, singular. Okay, but why not then universes? It's plural. If universe is the proper translation, fine. But why is it not singular? Why is it not plural? See, if you leave it, if they just translated every one of them, all the ions, if they just translated them all ages, we would have, by faith, we understand that the ages were created by the word of God. He appeared at the end of the ages. He created the ages. See, that to me, that's a simpler translation and a more reliable translation. And also, when you compare that to the passage, I think we got pretty much where we wrapped up. To me, that makes more sense when Paul says, we are the same people upon whom, that's verse 13. I need verse 11, right? Yeah, verse 11. On whom the end, we are the people on whom the end of the ages has come. Because it's not as if Paul doesn't use that language elsewhere. Well, I don't think Paul wrote Hebrews, but Paul uses it here in Hebrews for 1 Corinthians 10. Why could the Hebrews writer not be using it in exactly the same way? Okay. Which would then fit, as I think I said this, I don't remember, which I think would fit very nicely with the end of all things. He created all things. The end of all things is at hand. And what is it? It's the end of the ages. So that translational work to me makes a lot more sense. The biggest problem with it, and I'll tell you this, if you're a dispensational premillennialist, which our commentary that we use all the time is, if this is the end of the ages, if by whom he also created the ages, and that's chapter 1, and then in chapter 9 we're at he appeared at the end of the ages, you got a problem. Because you cannot, if you're a dispensational premillennialist, you cannot have the ages ending in the first century. Only a preterist can do that. Now, why they translated that world singular beyond that, I don't know. The Old King James does it. The Old King James comes across the word ion all the time and translates it world. Okay. So if you use the Old King James, what does the Old King James do in Hebrews 9:26? I don't remember that. I don't remember what the King James says right here. Hebrews 9:26. Oh, I still have the interlinear turned on. Let me turn that off. 9:26. 26. That's 10. That's why that wasn't looking right. I'm in chapter 10, not chapter 9. Hebrews 9:26 in the King James. Yep. Since the foundation of the world, but now once in the end of the world, he has appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. Okay. Um, so world the first time is cosmos. I think we looked at that Tuesday. The first appearance there is world, since the foundation of the cosmos. So from the beginning of time, he would have had to because that's when sin starts pretty quickly. Since the foundation of the world, Garden of Eden, sin started. Okay. But now once at the end of the world, and see what the King James does there, cosmos and ion. See that to me is a translational problem. That's two different words in the Greek. And why the King James translators, it's an older book. They probably just I I don't know the history of that. I don't know why. Okay. But that is a consistent. appearance in the King James. It almost never translates. Does it ever? Does anybody know? I'm not sure. Well, the Strong's Concordance would tell you. Does the King James ever translate the word ion, age? I don't think it does. Do I have my? No, I don't have my Strong's out anywhere. Is it down here? I'm not sure where my Strong's is, but yeah. I'm not sure the King James ever translates the word ion, age, but newer translations do, but not always, as we've seen. So that's where we were. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to spend that long on it because that's kind of where I was just trying to review what we did Tuesday, and I ended up going way back into it. So I think this word here should be plural. It is plural, and the better translation of that, in my opinion, I'm no Greek scholar, but it's plural and it's the word age. Why not translate it that way? The only reason I can come up with is doctrinal. That'd be my take. Because if you translate all of this plural ages all the way through the book of Hebrews, and you're writing this book in about AD 68, guess what the end of the age is in AD 68? It's Matthew 24, verse 3. What shall be the sign of thy coming and of the end of the age? And so once you do that, now the book of Hebrews is preterist. And it is. Okay? Because when Hebrews chapter 10, verse number 25, do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together as the manner of some is, or as the habit of some is, but encouraging one another, all the more as you see the day approaching. There's only one day that can be. If this book is about the end of the age, and this is chapter 10, verse 25, and we were just in chapter 9, verse 26, about the end of the ages. Okay? What day is that? There's only one day that can be. That's the fall of Jerusalem. Okay? This book becomes a heavily preterist book, which it is. Okay? And that's the point I was trying. I hope I made that point Tuesday because I'm making it now. And there's some ramifications of that. If I think I'm pretty sure I did say this Tuesday, because if a full preterist, a Max King disciple were here listening to me and challenging me on this, they would be eating up what I said Tuesday and what I just spent 15, 20 minutes reviewing today, because they would love to hear me say that about the book of Hebrews. Okay. Among other passages, though, their problem is actually going to be down here in verse number 27 of chapter 9, because they're going to think end of the ages, okay, that's AD 70. That's great. Okay. But then verse 27 becomes a problem for them. Is the opponent of the man wants to die once, and after that comes the judgment. They're going to have a problem with that. Because they got to have a second death in there. They got to have a third death in there. Okay. King James does translate at age. Thank you, Andy. Ephesians 2:7, 3:21, and Colossians 1:26. Appreciate that. Okay. Um, there you go. So, but we'll talk about that 6 months from now when we get down to chapter 9. All right. So I think it's a heavily preterist book. I just do. It kind of goes back to what Tevin didn't actually ask that, but it's kind of on the same thought. Okay. What's the other option? That's not the right question here, but it's the right path to the right question. This is a book written in AD, wherever you want to put it, somewhere between AD 65 and 70. Okay. Written to Hebrew Christians before the fall of the temple, because very clearly throughout this book, the temple is standing. What on earth do you think they're writing about? What would a person who's probably Jewish writing to Hebrews, and throughout the book quotes, and we'll see this here in just a second, quotes the Old Testament over and over and over and over and over again, and it's based upon his analysis of the Aaronic priesthood and the temple and the first covenant. What do you think he's writing about in AD 68? If you're not studying this book as a warning about the impending destruction of Jerusalem, you do not understand the book of Hebrews. All right. Now, obviously, the ramifications of it are much bigger than that. because the topics he brings up, the divinity of Jesus, the nature of the sacrifice of Jesus, the better covenant, better priesthood, better mediator, the perfection of those who have been, he's perfected forever, those who are being sanctified, 10:14, so on. Salvation by faith, Hebrews 11, all of that. Okay, all of that. Now I will say this. Let me show you. Somebody show me. Let me help you here. Okay, salvation by faith versus Hebrews 11 verses 1-6. Okay, great. Faith is the evidence of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. That is true. That is a universal truth. Obviously, that's the nature of faith. Without faith, it is impossible to please Him. For he, whoever would come to God, must believe that He is, and that He rewards those who seek Him. Okay, great. That's a universal truth. That's true from the Garden of Eden till now. Okay, but scroll on down here to the end of chapter 11. These all died in faith. They haven't received the promises. He says that earlier in the chapter. Okay, commended through their faith, they did not receive what is promised. Okay, these all died in faith was said earlier. Since God had provided something better for us, that they apart from us should not be made perfect. Okay? Therefore we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. Let us also lay aside every weight and the sin which clings so closely to us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. I know what you do with this text. I don't have to ask. I know what you do with it. I know what every preacher I've ever heard talk about the race that is set before us. You talking about the Christian life, aren't you? You are talking about the Christian life. The race that is set before you is the Christian life. And when you think about the Christian life, it is a race that needs to be run with endurance. That is a truth, but that is not what the Hebrews writer is talking about. Who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame. I wonder what shame the Hebrews writer might be talking about to Hebrews. I wonder what race that needs endurance. The one who endures to the end will be saved. Matthew 24. Okay? But then I want you to get down in here. Verse 4. In your struggle against sin, you have not resisted to the point of shedding blood. Okay? They were going to, because the great tribulation's coming. Keep going. And have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord. I know what you do with this text. See, right now you believe that the events of your life. I actually heard somebody talk about this recently. I'm not going to say who. I'm not going to tell you where because I don't want to call anybody out on this one. I actually heard somebody talking about this very text recently. And that person, as he was, I just said it was a he. Okay, it was a he. Making comment on this passage was talking about the events of his life and needing wisdom to be able to discern the judgments and the discipline of God in his life. And he quoted this text. And as I was listening to it, I'm like, oh no. No, 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 no. You see, this is a quotation from Proverbs, Solomon. Okay? The Lord disciplines those whom he loves. He chastises every son whom he receives. This is a quotation of Old Testament texts. What's going on? And what is it? It is for discipline that you have to endure what? Well, you have to endure the race that is set before you. You have to run with patience that race. You have to endure. And it is the fact that you are enduring this discipline which shows you are sons. To go back to Tevin's question, what's the other option? What's the other option? Because you're suffering shame and persecution all through the New Testament. How are you suffering shame and persecution? We're suffering at the hands of Jews. Starts in Acts 4. Stephen's dead in Acts 7. Paul starts doing his job there in Acts 8. Then the Jews start chasing him around all through the book of Acts. And what were they claiming? Well, they were claiming to be the sons of God. That's why Romans 8 talks about one day the revealing of the sons of God will happen when the adoption of the body happens. This is talking about AD 70. This is the fulfillment of the promise of the Great Tribulation. That's what's being talked about. And if you have any doubt about it, just keep reading. And we'll talk about this more strongly when we get over there. But blazing fire is about to happen. God has prophesied that he is going to speak one more time, and he is going to shake those things that can be shaken, so those things that cannot be shaken may remain. Ta-da! When is he about to remove those things that can be shaken? What's the whole book of Hebrews about? Better covenant, better promise, better mediator, better, 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 better. Better than what? Well, the things that's about to be removed. The discipline of this is that 1 Peter chapter 4, the time has come that judgment's to begin at the household of God. You know you're about to be disciplined. I will tell you this, as far as I know in my life, the event described in Hebrews chapter 12 has never happened to me. If God has ever disciplined me, chastised me, apart from the Word of God, which does that, it does that regularly, which is what it's supposed to do. Apart from that, I have never, in one time in my life, been aware of it. And see, there's the problem. I just sat there and I listened to this lesson. And as I watched it, I sat and listened to this lesson. Exposition before application. I can't tell you how many Christians I know walking around who read Hebrews chapter 12 and immediately apply it to themselves, and they're walking around thinking God is chastising me. Something bad happens in their life, and they're thinking, well, that's just God disciplining me. Stop it. You're trying to interpret the words of the events of your life as if somehow what happened to you there was a car wreck on the interstate, and I ended up showing up late to a job interview, and I didn't get the job. Well, what's God trying to teach me? Well, nothing. There was just a car wreck on the interstate, because that's what happens in life. God had nothing to do with the car accident. It's just a car accident. Okay. You missed a job interview, and so you didn't get the job because you missed the interview because you were late. There's a life lesson there. Yeah. Is if you got an important job interview, you really want to make sure that you're taking provisions to make sure you get there on time. Another life lesson might be that sometimes you can't do that because you're not perfect, and you're not a genius, and omniscient, and knows all the events that are about to happen. And so then sometimes life happens. Lots of life lessons in there. Okay. None of them are God did that because God did not cause a car accident so that you could learn a lesson. Stop. That's not what God does. Doesn't do that. Okay. Hebrews 12. Oh, he does that. He does that. Time has come that judgment's going to start at the household of God, because the household of God, guess where it was located? It started in Jerusalem. So it's about to start right there. I wonder if any of the apostles were left in that area. Okay. Ronald's comment. I thought day meant judgment. It does. It does. That is exactly what Hebrews chapter 11 or Hebrews chapter 10 means. And all the more as you see the day approaching. The day is AD 70. The day there is the day of Zechariah 12, 13, and 14. It shall come to pass in that day. It's not a literal 24-hour day, but it's the day. It's the point. Okay? This can't be the second coming because guess what you can't do? You can't see the second coming coming. There are no signs to it. Best hope you have of a sign of the second coming, the best hope would be at the end of Revelation chapter 20, at the conclusion of the 1,000-year reign. When the 1,000 years are ended, Satan will be released from prison, and then verse 7 and following. That is your best hope to try and establish a sign of the second coming. Okay, another topic for another day, not going on down that path. You can't see the day approaching. On the other hand, the judgment of AD 70, well, see that no one lead you astray. Nation will rise against nation, famines, they'll deliver you up to tribulation, lawlessness, and so on. When you see the abomination of desolation, let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. When you see it. So you can kind of see the day coming. Hebrews 10 has to be that. It can't be anything else. It's not second coming. It's not Sunday. I've heard people say, well, it's just Sunday. But you see Sunday coming? I guess you can if you look at a calendar. But it's not like it's a surprise. I can tell you exactly if I've had a calculator in front of me, and I can tell you exactly how many hours, minutes, and seconds it's going to be until we have worship on Sunday morning. That's a calculable thing. There's no secret to it. I don't have to look for it. I don't have to observe it. It's just it's going to happen. Okay. Anyway, way off topic there. All right. Back to our text. Now, all of that, I say way off topic. I think all of that is important in understanding what is going on here. So, point I was making to get down that path is I'm heavily preterist on the opening here of the book of Hebrews. I would prefer to see one more time. I would prefer to see the word world there in the plural, translated age, the word universe down here in the plural, translated age, and so on. I think the word of his power is the word given by the power of the Holy Spirit, Acts chapter 1, which is there in Acts chapter 2. I think I did mention that Tuesday as well. I think all of that fits. Okay. Then you get to the end of 3. After making purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high, having become as much superior to angels as the name is higher than theirs. Acts chapter 4, no other name under heaven whereby men must be saved. And obviously, this is not a change in the nature of Jesus. I'm not going to go down that path. This is not a statement to say that Jesus somehow changed his nature. He did not change his nature. Okay. Just as here in Hebrews chapter 5, verse number 8 and following, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all them that obey him. Okay. His nature did not change. Okay. But he is divine. Guess what divine does not have to do? Divine, certainly not in a temporal, material body, doesn't ever have to obey. There's, there's no one he has to obey. He's divine. Okay? That's the kind of the concept of being God. However, Hebrews chapter 2, he was in all points, and Hebrews 2 start about verse 10 and go on down. He was on all points made like as we are, yet without sin. Okay? That's the very nature of them. Okay? Where's the verse I want? There it is. Well, chapter 4 as well. He therefore the children share in the flesh and blood. He himself likewise partook of those things. Okay, same things. Okay, and then chapter 4 and so on. He had never done that. Now he had. And he had to learn obedience. And being then made not perfect in the sense of he was imperfect, translate that word telos into the word complete. Okay? He has to be the mediator, made both man and flesh, and so on. So that's the same thought that's here. Okay? His nature didn't change. But now He is the fulfillment of the eternal plan of God. And the argument here, from this point through the remainder of chapter 1, well, really all the way down through the end of chapter 2, is that he is superior to angels. Now, I'm not going to go down this path because frankly, I'm not that well versed in it. But it's right about here that sometimes you'll hear commentators and speakers, when they talk about this, make a very specific argument about the Jews' connection to, wrong word, their perception of angels. And scroll on down here. We'll get there probably on Tuesday fully. Hebrews chapter 2, verse number 2, for since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable. Okay. Oftentimes, when we study what's going on there on Mount Sinai, he's talking here, of course, the message there being the Old Testament. When you think about it, who declared the message? Well, who declared the message would be God. God wrote the Ten Commandments that Moses ended up breaking and so on. Okay. God did it. All right. When you take the fullness of the declaration of it, the New Testament is pretty consistent that it was delivered by or through angels, that there was a mediator there. Acts 7:53, that works on 53, and then earlier in the chapter, which of the prophets did your fathers not persecute? This is Acts, and actually Acts this time, not Hebrews, Acts 7:52. Which of the prophets did your fathers persecute? And those that they announced beforehand before the coming of the righteous one, whom they have now betrayed and murdered, you received the law as delivered by angels. That's 53. Is it 35 I want? 35, 38? Where does it start up in there? Yeah, this 38. You could start up at 35, I think, but talking about Moses. This is the one who was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him at Mount Sinai and with our fathers. Okay, so that's Acts 7:38. And then it's Galatians 3:19, 3:18. No. It is Galatians 3, isn't it? Intermediate it is 3:19. I just didn't read the full verse. Sorry. Until the offspring had come, to whom the promise had been made, it was put in place through angels by an intermediary. Okay. So when you get to the New Testament, you have angels being mentioned repeatedly about the deliverance of the law of Moses. Okay. So that has to be sort of in the background of the approach that the Hebrews writer is making here. Now, if you really want to get down into it, there's one other passage I want to go to, but let me say this first. If you really want to get down into it, you need to go start reading the Apocrypha and other rabbinical type writings, because the part that I'm skipping here, because again, I am not well versed in it. I remember studying it 35 years ago when we studied the intertestament period at the Memphis School of Preaching, and we went through the entirety in the Apocrypha and studied it verse by verse like we did the rest of the Bible. We studied the Apocrypha verse by verse. Curtis Cates taught us that class, and if he were still living, I'd let him do this right here because he knows it better than he knows it now better than I do, certainly. He knew it better when he was alive. He knew it better than I do now. But there are some connections that people will make to some of the apocryphal writings about the way that the Jews perceived and elevated angels. Which, of course, when you go to the Old Testament, there's several angels, angelic appearances, and so on that get very interesting. Now, before I go there, let me show you that in one other text. Let me take you over to Colossians, the end of Colossians chapter 2, where Paul says, "Let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or in regard to festival or new moon or Sabbath. These are a shadow of the things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. Let no one disqualify you, insisting on asceticism and worship of angels." Okay. Now, here the commentators kind of argue. Let me see. I don't know what the commentator here says. Let me see what the denominational commentary says here. Does he make it Greek, or does he make it Greek/Roman, or does he make it Jewish? Where is that? Worship of angels. This artificial godliness of legalism was connected with the worship of angels. In fact, legalism is a teaching inspired by fallen angels. Okay. No, he doesn't deal with it. Okay. But this idea of the worship of angels, sometimes you get a commentator talking about, is that some kind of, again, is that Jewish or is that Greek? And if you study the Colossians, and we haven't done that together, we've used chapter 2 a lot, a little bit of chapter 3 in our studies together. But when you study Colossians broadly, you're going to be introduced to something referred to as the Phrygian heresy. Phrygia, the region in which Colossae is found, the Phrygian heresy is a concept that people use to try and move from Judaizing to Gnosticism. And they say that the church at Colossae was the earliest church really to have the blending of Greek mysticism with Judaistic theology. And so you start to get into an argument here about asceticism and the worship of angels and visions, as if the Phrygian heresy is a blending or combination of those. Okay. Long time since I studied anything directly about the Phrygian heresy, but it's along those lines. Okay. Point being is that when you start Hebrews, the reason the Hebrews writer very quickly starts making the comparison between Jesus and angels is not that he is trying to argue that Jesus is the highest, like the Jehovah's Witnesses say that he is high, he either is or higher than Michael the archangel, something like that. He is not trying to make that comparison. All right, this is a book about the comparison between the gospel and the law of Moses, and his audience that he's going to get down here to in chapter 2 understood the angelic basis of the origin of the law of Moses, and that proved to be reliable. The whole argument is not that Jesus is superior, but he is still an angel. No. The whole argument to Christians, these are Hebrew Christians, who likely, as we'll see, these are mature, developed Christians, Hebrews chapter 5, Hebrews chapter 6, and so on. These are mature Christians who might very well, at least the older ones of them, might very well have been eyewitnesses, maybe some of the 500 that are mentioned in 1 Corinthians 15, to the resurrected Lord. They don't need to be proven, they don't need to be convinced that Jesus is the supreme angel, because they've already seen, no, he is the Son of God, which is the argument that is made here. You are my son. That's the very first thing out of the Hebrews writer's mouth. You are my son. Okay? And the whole argument is framed upon the truth that these Hebrews, to go back to our question, what's the other option? If they're turning away from the faith, which is obviously they are all through the book here, all through Hebrews, these people are in danger of turning away from God, or at least turning away from Christianity. To what are they turning? Well, they're turning back to their former way of life. They're turning back to the law of Moses, because they believe that word is reliable. It's the law of Moses. It's reliable. It's been here for 1,500 years. The gospel's only been around for about 30 years, maybe 40. That's the argument. Jesus is superior to that. Better. Okay? So you have to, that's why it's Paul's right here as you get into this section about angels, is we tend to go to like Exodus 20, the giving of the Ten Commandments, and that whole section from, well, start about Exodus, start about 16, and basically go through the rest of the book of Exodus and Leviticus. What you have is the revelation on Mount Sinai from God to Moses. And typically, when we think about it, we don't put angels in that process. We in our head, at least tell me if I'm wrong here, but we in our head kind of have the thought God's talking directly to Moses. Well, the concept is that there's an intermediary, that there are angels present. Okay. Now, I guess technically there are, for when you deal with the nation of Israel, technically then there would be two intermediaries, would there not? There'd be God speaking by some presentation of angelic beings, the messengers, to Moses, who then is the one that began to speak to the nation. So technically, two intermediaries. Okay, and that's sometimes what people will do with Galatians 3. Was it 3:19? 3:19 in Galatians is that it was put in place through angels, through the messengers, by an intermediary, and they'll say the intermediary there is Moses. Okay, so you have four layers. If you structure it that way, if that's your understanding of what Paul's saying, you've got four layers there. You've got God, angels, Moses, the nation. Okay, I'm not really trying to get you some kind of I was not there. I don't know because God passes His image in front of Moses. Exodus 34 isn't. Yeah, so there is a connection there directly, some level between God and Moses, but there are also angels there in part of this process. I don't know. I just know there were. Okay, so the manifestation of that I don't know, but it's but point being is the Hebrews. Well, they would have read when Stephen's making that argument in Acts 7. That's not the point that they were having a dispute about. They already accepted that it was through the manifestation of some angelic presence that the law was given. They had already accepted that, and it was in their rabbinical lore. That's the basis of the argument in Acts 7. It's the basis of the argument here. And the conclusion you have come to is that the word given by angels was reliable. So this is not a statement then about in chapter 1 here, this is not a statement here about that he became in the sense that he changed his nature, but you have a manifestation of he's resurrected, Acts 1, Acts 2, but he also ascended on high, to which the angel said, yeah, he's going to come back again. That's Acts 1. There is an exaltation. He sat down at the right hand of the majesty on high. King of kings, Lord of lords, to him was given glory, dominion, and a kingdom. That's the foundational basis of this, all right? Again, if these Hebrews, these mature Hebrew Christians that are likely in Jerusalem, if they have been around long enough, some of them might have been present on the day of Pentecost. Some of them might have been among those 500 to whom Jesus appeared, according to 1 Corinthians 15. And if that's true, some of them might remember Peter's sermon. Therefore, being by the right hand of God exalted, and having received of the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit, he hath shed forth this which you now see and hear. Therefore, let all the house of Israel know assuredly, the same Jesus whom you crucified, he raised him up and made him both Lord and Christ. That's verse 33 down to verse 36. See, that's the background. That's the context of this, okay? And I do think, can't prove it, but based upon what is said about these saints over here in Hebrews chapter 5, I want to explain it, but I can't because you've become dull of hearing. For though by this time you ought to be teachers, because you shared in the heavenly gift. You experienced the power of the Holy Spirit. That would start in Acts 2. Based upon that structure in chapter 5 and then in chapter 6, these people, at the very least, these people are mature Christians. They may or may not have been present on the day of Pentecost, they've been in the church at Jerusalem, you know, they're no more than one generation removed. If it's not, if they are not the ones who were there on the day of Pentecost, their parents were. That's who you're dealing with. Okay. And that is to whom he is making the argument here in this passage. I got a couple of comments there I didn't get to. Let me take pause for a second and take a look at what y'all said. What did David say there? I hadn't read that one yet. Listening to a denominational preacher on TV this morning. Okay. He got so upset about people saying most of Revelation was fulfilled. In his view, it's still all future. He goes on a rant about Armageddon, about Antichrist, about rapture. I gotta about the rapture, etc. These people are ate up in the head. Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly, David. Wholeheartedly. Yeah. What you got down there? According to verses 7 and 14, what is the specific role and purpose that God assigned to angels? Okay, that was long enough ago. I don't remember what chapter I was in, Ronald. 7 and 14 of Hebrews 1? I guess so. Ministering spirits sent out to serve those who are to inherit salvation. And then makes his angels winds and ministers a flame of fire. Ahead of me there a little bit, cited from Psalm 104. Okay, Psalm 104, and then down here in verse 14. Well, that's not a quotation, but I want the. Say that's not a quotation. Y'all can't. I hate it when it does that to me. Shortest answer I can give you, because we'll come at time permitting, we'll come back and talk about these verses in more detail. His angels, as it's translated here from Psalm 104, minister, and his ministers a flame of fire. Okay. Go back to the time of Hezekiah. An angel appears in the camp of the Assyrian army, and in one night kills 185,000 men. Okay, if you want to go back as far as Exodus 12 and following, angel of the Lord goes through and kills all the firstborn. So yeah, when God brought judgment, angelic presence is a part of it. Ministering spirits to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation. I told you I'm heavily preterist here. I think that's AD 70. The ministering spirits are sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation. I'm gonna do it now exactly, but when we get down here actually looking at that verse, I'm gonna come back here to Matthew chapter 24, and I'm going to go these false prophets, these false Christ are going to go out there and they're going to try to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Okay. Where is it in Matthew 20? It's too late. It's got to be earlier. Yeah, it's earlier in Matthew 24. Where is it? There it is. 20, the verse right before is what I needed. And if those days had not been cut short, no human would be saved, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short. Now, grow up. This one I know was earlier in the text, because what he says up here is, guess what you need to do? You need to endure to the end to be saved. Okay? Endure to the end to be saved. So that has not happened yet. For the sake of the elect, the days of the persecution will be cut short. Okay? And you scroll all the way down here, by the way. He sends out his angels to gather the elect. That's verse 31 of Matthew 24. See, I think the Bible's simple. The Bible's not trying to trick you, it's trying to explain itself to you. In AD 68, plus or minus a few months, the Hebrews writer says, he quotes Psalm 104 and says the angels are going to be ministers of flame of fire. And then he turns around and he says, they are ministering spirits sent out to serve for the sake of those who are to inherit salvation. You know, the sake of the elect, who are going to endure to the end, which is what Hebrews chapter 10 tells them to do. He says, we are in need of great endurance to do the will of God. You may receive what is promised, which is deliverance from that great tribulation, because for the sake of the elect, if they endure to the end, they will be saved. So don't shrink back. We are not those who shrink back and are destroyed, but we are those who have faith and preserve our souls, their souls. And then lo and behold, in Matthew 24, it's the angels who go out and gather the elect and for whom the days of the tribulation are cut short. When you blend those two passages together, verse 14 in my book gets to be a really easy passage. Now, what we tend to do with that text, what we tend to do with it is we begin to get very speculative about what are angels doing today. And that goes right back to my little rant that I went on to about the discipline of the Lord. That's AD 70. That is AD 70. That is the Great Tribulation. That is the book of Revelation. Okay, it's happening right then. The chastisement of the Lord is happening right then. 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 angels, all that. It's happening right then. That's what Hebrews 1 is about. Okay? Let's go to Hebrews 1. I mean, it's what Hebrews 1 is about, but that's what the book of Revelation is about. Same thing. Okay? But instead, since we skip over all of that, we don't ask the what's the other option question. We skip over all that. And we immediately start making modern day applications, and you get all this kind of speculative stuff about, well, God was chastising me. Or we got angels out there doing stuff, and we got angels out here doing stuff, ministering and so on. I'm not denying that angels could be out here in this world. Sure, fine. God is sovereign. This is his world. If God wants to send a host of angels into the world and have them marching around the world today, can he do that? Sure, he can. It's his world. And who am I to tell God he can't do that? But I'm not going to use this verse as the basis for me assuming that that is the normative state of humanity and that the angels of God are actively walking through this world right now for the sake of those to inherit salvation at the second coming. Because I got to tell you, hey, angels, when one of you killed 185,000 Syrians and did not let a single arrow shoot into the city of Jerusalem, hello, angels. I got a complaint I'd like to register at the office because it was just one of y'all who killed 185,000 people in one night and didn't let a single bowstring snap to shoot an arrow, not one. I got a question because you're not exactly doing a real good job today. See, there's the problem. And so we start to speculate about all the things that may or may not be going on in this world because we put application in front of exposition. The Hebrews writer wrote to a group of Hebrews and said those words. Go back and read Matthew 24 one more time and tell me Matthew 24 doesn't fit right there. It does. That's what I would do with it. So, I think I was Ronald. So there you go. All right. Hey, my dad was here a minute ago. Hey, Dad. Tuned in late today, getting ready to be on answering Macedonian call from London for 2 weeks. My dad is heading to London. Yes, he is. And then to connect in Nashville in August, we'll beat lectureship in Lorraine and next week in East Liverpool, Ohio, on the road for 7 of the next 8 weeks. Have mercy, Dad. But yeah, he's gonna be in London teaching there. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. I didn't know he had all these other trips in mind. Man, he turns 87 in July. Traveling and preaching a whole lot more than I do. Good to see you, Dad, though. Good to have you with us. Um, I kind of just covered the rest of the text. I kind of did just cover the rest of the chapter, didn't I? Didn't mean to do that, but I did it faster. Hey, David, you just saved us time. I'm going to say that's what you were intended to do, right? You were trying to save us some time? Because I think I just said pretty much everything I was about to say for the next 45 or 50 minutes. Well, what am I going to talk about now? But anyway. Yeah, Andy, can he slow down a bit? Sad thing is, well, I guess he's got to fly to London. Pretty sure he's flying to London. Now, he left out he said 7 of the next 8 weeks he's going to be out preaching. He did leave out that 1 week. He did leave out that 1 week. Because I'm maybe off. I think I'm right here. Julie told me this, and I'm repeating this if I'm not mistaken. He's going to London, going to be preaching over there. My mother's going with him. And then, if I am not mistaken, my oldest brother and I believe his wife are going to be joining them in London. And I think they're going on a European cruise together for a week. So, congratulations on that. So, he is squeezing in a week's vacation, if I'm right. I could be wrong. I think that's the agenda if I've been told properly. So I think he's going to have a little vacation squeezed there in the middle. I guess at 86 you're allowed to take a vacation. Somebody should tell him though. At 86 you're supposed to be retired. Because I don't intend to be gainfully employed at 86. I do not intend to be gainfully employed at 86. If I could get out of being gainfully employed by 60, I would. I'm still working on it. And work on it every day. What do I got down there? Oh, wait a minute. I messed that up. Hold on. What did I do? What did I do? There you go. There you go. All right. Oh, all the comments gone? Okay, there they are. Ronald says, you may have already. Wait a minute. Okay, Hey, Ronald, you got another question in there. Why does the author spend more time in chapter verse using the Old Testament quotes to prove Jesus, spirit, angels? What might the original audience have believed about angels? I did kind of touch on that some, Ronald. I did. And when I did, I confessed that it's not an area of my expertise at all. Does our commentary? Let me see if the commentator does it. Hold on just a second. Because that's a common argument, a common discussion inside Hebrews. I'm going to need my glasses. No, I don't. Hold on. Supremely is a son. Those who see in Hebrew ties with sectarian Judaism point to the highly developed angelology of the Dead Sea sect. These verses offer an effective rebuttal against any tendency to give excessive prominence to angels. So he's doing it a little bit. He's connecting it to the Dead Sea sect. Okay. Heard of that before, but don't ask me because, as I told you, this is not something I've spent a lot of time on. Um, Quotation from 5a from either Psalm. Yeah. That may be all he says about it. Angels, Septuagint, referring to angels, properly renders the text. Oh, that's got to be a second Esdras. Now we're in the Apocrypha. It is possible that, in line with the one strand of Jewish thought about angels, and then he quotes second Esdras, I can never say that one, Esdras. The writer understood the statement of Psalm 104, verse 4. What is that rendering there? Oh, stink. Oh, it's verses 21 and 22. Hold on. I got to make that bigger so both you and I can read it. Verses 21 and 22, it is said, whose throne is inestimable, whose glory may not be comprehended, for before whom the host of angels stand with trembling, whose service is conversant in wind and fire, whose word is true and saying constant, whose fearful command is strong and ordinance fearful. Okay. Been a long time since I've been in that book. Probably been 30 years since I read that book. So he's tying that to angelic beings. O Lord, thou dwellest in everlastingness, which beholdest from things above in heaven, whose throne is inestimable, which would be God, with whom the host of angels stand, whose service is conversant in wind and fire. So that's that. He's quoting there Psalm 104. Okay, that's what the commentator is doing. But at least he brings up the Apocrypha. So not as direct as some people go into it, but that's where I would go with it, Ronald, is that there is a Hebrew emphasis. What was the language this commentator just used a second ago? And I got to find that because I didn't highlight it. Excessive prominence to angels, and he tied that to the Dead Sea sect. So that's a relatively short discussion of it in this commentary, but just start doing the research on it. And as I said, this is sometimes you hear me say that I know people who are a lot of people who are much better Bible students than I am, and this is what I'm talking about. I have about 6 seconds worth of patience to read through this stuff. I start losing it. I try to at least be aware of it so that if any of it has ramifications on what I believe, at least I'm aware that I need to know that. But once I figure out that I don't need to know that, I lose interest and I just move on to something else. That makes me not a very good student because I'm not. I'm just not. I don't. David Kaufman was in here earlier, and I guarantee you, David Kaufman reads more than I do because I I don't have the patience for it. But that's. I hope that helps some. It has to be tied to the Judaistic doctrine slash theological view of angels, and I think I don't know if you were here when I said it or not, but I believe it's all tied to this idea right here. The message that was delivered by or declared by angels. Okay, there in Hebrews chapter 2, verse 2. So that's why, because he's trying to draw the comparison between the law of Moses and the gospel of Jesus Christ. One is reliable and has a proven track record, but what we have now is a great salvation, a greater salvation, and it is attested to by the Lord and also by God who bore witness through the Holy Spirit. So you have a full inscription of the Godhead there in chapter 2 verses 3 and 4, and his audience already accepted as reliable a message of angels. So therein is the comparison and the contrast. So the reason it spends so much time on it is because of the very nature and the belief structure of the Hebrew audience that would be receiving it. And they're trying to pull back into the message of angels as opposed to push forward and hold on to the message of the Son of God. Okay. So that would be the comparison. Um, what's Tevin got there? John, if I'm not serving like a dad when I'm 80 plus, if where is he getting this energy from? Don't know. Don't know. And let's give credit to my dad for a moment. He is doing a lot of wonderful things at 86, about to be 87. My mom, I'm 55. I think she was 30 when I was born. So she's either 84 or 85. It's June. Oh, no. I was there on her birthday. Yeah, she just had her birthday. It was June 13th. Sorry. So she's 80. I think she's 85 now. Um, and she travels with him because my mom, her mind is dead sharp. Uh, she is as quick as she's ever been. Her eyesight's still good. Hearing is probably not as good as it used to be, but hearing's still pretty good. Heart and lungs seem to be going well. But my mom is trying to take Iron Man job up, or she's trying to be Iron Woman, I think, because I think she's got more titanium in her body than she does bone. She has had so many. I don't even know. A couple of dozen easy. I don't even know. Just surgeries, knees and hips and back a lot of back. It's painful to watch her walk. And the reason they hardly ever fly anywhere is because they have a van and basically they lay all the seats down like you can in a van and put a mattress back there. And my mom travels in the van, laying down for a lot of the trip on the mattress in the back of the van. So when he's up here saying that he's going to be doing all these different places, he's going to be speaking in Nashville in August. He's going to be in Lorain, Ohio, and then he's going to be over in Liverpool, Ohio. Um, yeah, he's still physically in pretty good shape. Lost a lot of weight recently. He's in pretty good shape. His hearing's not good at all. Somebody needs to talk to him. His hearing's bad. Um, but um, this let's not bypass my mom. She needs a lot of praise for putting up with him still running around the planet trying to teach the Bible at 86. It's like, Dad, I can buy you a camera. I can buy you a camera. I can set you up just like this, and you can teach it every single day right here. I'll even let you on digital Bible study. You don't have to travel around the world to preach the gospel. You could do it every day right there from your house, and Mom wouldn't have to. We could have a family conversation. Can we have a bit of counseling? Can we do a little bit of counseling with my dad right here? Anyway, sorry, I'm getting in the family business right now. What you got down there, Ronald? The original readers were tempted to drift away from Jesus back to safer, familiar religious practices. What modern cultural trends or personal comforts compete with church focus and devotion? That's a good question. That's a good question. That's a good question. At least for them, at least for them, and this I did make this point earlier in the broadcast, but at least for them, where they were heading from Christianity back to Judaism was an improvement. Well, maybe not. Probably an improvement. I'll stick with that word because it's not entirely wrong. If it's a little bit wrong, it's not entirely wrong. They thought they were returning back to that message, which was that message that was reliable. They thought they were perhaps going back to honoring God. So it's not that his audience was trying to get rid of their connection to, if you will, Jehovah. They just thought that Moses was a better path than Jesus, but they were still trying to be connected to Jehovah. That would be a real interesting question because it's not just personal comforts and devotion to the church. It is, how are people deconstructing? They love that word these days. How are people deconstructing the church to let them be, if you will, more spiritual? Okay. I've seen on Facebook and other social media sites that I go to, Facebook and X. Those are the two social media sites that I go to with any kind of that have any kind of print. I go to YouTube, obviously, and other places like TikTok, but um, places that have print that I read stuff. It's usually either Facebook post or X. Um, and I am amazed both inside the church and in evangelical postings as well at how strong the church planting house church movement is. Yeah, even in churches of Christ. There's a couple of guys I follow on Facebook that are hard advocates of the let's do home churches and plant as many churches as we can. And I think that might be the modern equivalent to it. If other than, because Ronald, I think you might be talking about jumping down, going back into a more secular life. Okay, which that's a good discussion too. But that's one we've been having for a lot of years. Don't leave the church to go back into some hedonistic form. Don't do that. Okay, but just like the Hebrews now, then we're trying to be more spiritual. I think that's the path that some people are on now with the home church movement. Okay, if you want to plant a church, great. And if you only have 4 or 5 people to start it or whatever it is, and you end up worshiping in somebody's home, great. You need to do that. And don't let the fact that you have to meet in a house somehow hinder you from planting a place where a church is. Okay. But what you're actually trying to do, at least in my opinion, because you're taking a church that is established, like here at the Rockledge Church, pre-COVID, we were running about 170. Our auditorium would hold maybe comfortably 210, 220. So we were getting close to that point where you have to start having a conversation. Okay. And for those numbers aren't huge, but that's where the home church crowd kind of pops up, is because what you have here is you have a preacher and you have a very good established eldership. And we're at a fixed location. And yeah, we do the same things every week and we tend to sit in the same seats every week. And there is a tradition, there's a paradigm that we use because that's the way people are. I think a lot of the home church movement is trying to get rid of that structure. They're deconstructing the church and trying to get away from what they would consider to be formalistic or legalistic or whatever, to give them more spiritual experience and spiritual freedom. Because what you're doing is you're not going out from Rockledge, Florida, and driving over to Christmas, Florida. And yes, there's a city relatively close here named Christmas, and I don't think there's a Church of Christ in Christmas. If there is, I don't know it. But you're going over to Christmas, Florida, and starting a church over there. No, 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 no. That's not what the home church movement is doing these days. The home church movement is a smooth way of dividing churches. Okay, it is the next generation of. Remember how? What was it? Let me just go ahead and change the screen here for a minute. But do you remember how? 20 years ago, maybe a little bit more than that, but it became fashionable basically to stop doing a traditional Sunday night service. And what do we replace it with? We replaced it with small groups. So a church like Rockledge, I don't think we ever did that. We didn't since I've been here because I'm here post COVID, and we're not running 170 post COVID. On a good Sunday, we're more like 120 now. But so if you had 170, you might have 4 or 5 small groups, and it was sold under the idea we're going to get our numbers bigger. We're going to get more people net will come out and be a part of it. But lo and behold, guess what started happening? You started having small groups that became their own little sect within the church, and that's what happens. And all it takes in that group of 8 or 10 or 12, whatever show up in that group, is you have one troublemaker who now has access to a private group that he gets to talk with. And I always heard, well, we got elders in all of them. No, you never did. No, you never did. That's not the way that works. And I think this is the next generation of it, because you're planting these small churches 5 miles down the road from an established Church of Christ. And I think that is to get that more experiential, personalized, spiritual involvement. I'm not saying that's true everywhere. Of course not. People, it's a church planning and starting churches in homes. That's a great concept. And probably what happened in a very large number, very high percentage opportunities in early day churches of Christ. People did meet in houses. That's even been talked about in the Bible. I do think they connected to synagogues and obviously the temple in Jerusalem as well as other places, but it happened. Okay, great. Do that. But don't do that 3 miles from your local Church of Christ. You're doing that for a reason. And the advocate of that is doing that for we're not traveling to some obscure place in Utah where there's 7 churches of Christ in the entire state. I made up that number again. I don't know. That's not what we're doing. This home church movement is doing it in Birmingham, Alabama, where there are 270 churches of Christ already. See, that's a power play. That's an agenda-driven power play. It just is. Don't fall for it. Okay. But I got off topic. That's why because I got off topic. So what else I got there? Um, Andy said, "Hey, thank you, Andy. Appreciate that. She is great example of a godly Christian woman." We're seeing stages, praise teams, communions conducted in a manner that is not pleasing. More people in the seat, but no substance. Emphasis on emotion and singing. Yeah. Although Ronald, as I was just saying, I think you're a little bit behind the time here. I think you are a little bit behind the time, and I'm not just talking about in churches of Christ. We have had um, visitors. We had one Sunday. First time here. I found out later. I talked to her. Found out later because my wife also talked to her. She showed up at our assembly by herself. And what I found out later is, as my wife asked, I didn't get to this portion of the conversation, but she asked, and apparently this woman that was here by herself was supposed to be meeting a friend here, and they were just drive-bys, and the friend was the one who initiated wanting to come and see, and the lady who showed up was supposed to come along with her, and it turns out that the first lady ended up like going to Sam's or something, and the second lady told my wife, yeah, I texted her and a little grumpy with her about not showing up for church, but she still came and she's still assembled with us. I say all that to say this. She said, yeah, I used to go to church. It's been a lot of years, and I was just looking for something, and I think she used the word simple. I was just looking, and we had that conversation 8 or 10 years ago. She went to a Christian church over on Merritt Island, I think it was, somewhere nearby here. And she was just looking for not what you see here. And that's not the first one. We've had 3 or 4 community visitors that I've talked to in the last 6 or 8 months. Now, I haven't had a lot of traction with them yet, but they are looking to get away from all the pomp and circumstance. They're trying to get away from some of that, from the show that gets put on. Now, that's not to say the show is going away, because there's still a lot of crowd. There's still a lot of crowd that still loves the show and they keep looking for better shows. That ain't going away. You're dead right there. That ain't going away at all. I do think though, just like when I was a kid, all the family vehicle was a big station wagon, and then lo and behold, about the time I started having kids, the family vehicle became a minivan because station wagons were uncool. So now the minivan was new, and now the family car is a crossover SUV which I think are hideous. I've never liked those at all. They're stupid vehicles. We can have that conversation if you want to. That takes me an hour just to have that conversation with them. But guess what's going to happen in a few years? The next generation of people are going to look at that. Yeah, I drove around. I used to have one of those SUVs all the time. I don't know what'll follow it. Okay, we can't make pickup trucks any bigger. Again, well, we can, but we shouldn't because they're no longer pickup trucks. They're sedans, oversized sedans with a big hole in the back of them or something. They're bad station wagons, is what they are. Um, but okay, I think the same thing is going to happen here with churches. You're going to get a people who get tired of that. And if and when, and I think when I think it's already happening to be a part of it. That's one side where churches of Christ have already got we already win that because that's already what we do. So yeah. Um, what's Mary got to say down there? H University, Harding, Heritage, Hermitage, Harding. I don't know what the. I don't remember the. Was I was talking about the home church movement? I don't remember. I don't know the context of that, Mary. So anyway, I said I didn't know what I was going to talk about for the next little bit. Let me just summarize and kind of wrap up because I really did. I didn't get into it yet, but let's go back into chapter one. Let me if you got any more comments on that, go ahead. I'll catch back to them. I want to make sure I do wrap this in though, because as who was it that asked? Was it Ronald? Oh, Harding Home Churches. Yeah, I don't have a lot of knowledge of the Harding Bible Department anymore. Mary used to. I don't now, but I would be surprised if where Harding is, they are not very big advocates of doing home churches as their evangelism programs at all. Okay. All right. See, y'all just got to I'm going to come back to y'all. I want to wrap this up though. Okay. Because whoever asked the question, it had to be Ronald. Where did it go? Yeah. Why does the author spend so much time here? Yeah. And that kind of led into this other thing that I went down. Um, and that is what the remainder of the chapter is. Okay. It is a quotation of various Psalms. And Psalm 2:7, that when I read the commentary to you, it's not a because you have this whole thing here about Aramaic versus the Septuagint and then the translation into English from Greek. So you get some different renderings here, and that is a point here when you're reading about it. I'm skipping over that because in our commentary set that's what he said, right? Um, the quotation in verse 5a is drawn from Psalm 2:7, while the quotation in Hebrews 1 or 1:5b, second half of the verse, comes either from 2 Samuel 7:14 or 1 Chronicles 7:13. That's where you start getting into it, okay? And that's what he's talking about here. Um, the two breaks. The ESV puts it as Psalm 7:2 or 2:7, excuse me, and then the center column reference it gives you there is 2 Samuel 7:14. So you get some of that, and it's a translational issue, okay, to determine exactly where the quotation comes from. I'm not, for our purposes in this study, I'm not particularly worried about that, but you should at least be aware of it. But yes, but that is exactly what he starts to do. He starts to quote one passage after another, affirming the sonship of Jesus, which then, to which of the angels did God ever say? He never said that. Okay. And so they are not that. Jesus, of course, is. So he is a name superior, more excellent than theirs are. So even from the Old Testament scriptures, he is making the case of the supremacy of Jesus over the angels, and that's the argument from verse 4 all the way down essentially through the end of end of chapter 2 at the least. Okay? And again, when he brings the firstborn into the world, he says, "Let all the angels of God worship him." All right? Which they should. That is Deuteronomy 32:43. You can also connect Psalm 97:7 to it. Same idea. The angels, and then the verse that we talked about at length, kind of already talked about it. Okay. Was Psalm 104, right? Yeah, Psalm 104, verse 4. And then to the Son, he says, your throne is God, is forever and ever. Okay. And, oh God, by the way, quotation there from Psalm 45, verses 6 and 7. Um, and all of those things, you just quotations from all of these to get to that point. Okay. Psalm 102, making the same argument about the supremacy of Jesus and his exaltation then above the angels. Now, I'm scrolling through that quickly because I want to get to one point here before I turn my attention back to y'all's comments. To which of the angels has he ever said, sit at my right hand until I make my enemies the footstool at your feet? Okay. Psalm 110, chapter 10, verse 13. We'll see that when we get there. Okay. That says that in verse 13, but then he also said up here, of the Son, he does say, of the firstborn, he says, to which of the angels did God ever say? Okay, so verse 5, and then all the way back down here in verse 13. To which of the angels has he ever said? The Hebrews writer here is making a very significant argument. He is making an argument about the silence of Scripture. Okay? God never said that. Without God saying it, the claim cannot be made. Okay? The same thing is going the Hebrews writer is going to make the same argument over here in chapter 7, down about verse 14, where he says, it is evident that our Lord descended from Judah, seed of David, right? And in connection with that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. Can't be a priest because God already specified Aaron, Levitical. Jesus is not from the right tribe, therefore he is not part of that priesthood. So in chapter 5, he says, in chapter 8, rather, verse 5, he says, verse 4, rather, excuse me, verse 4, now if he were on earth, he would not be a priest at all. Why? Because he's not from the right tribe. Okay? Which, by the way, you can't have Jesus serving as a priest on the earth because that's a strong argument right there. Dispensational premillennialists who believe in the restoration of national Israel, you got a big problem right there. That's a huge problem. We'll talk about it when we get there. But he is establishing an exegetical, expositional truth here. God authorizes by what he says, not by what he does not say. Okay? So when you get to Ephesians chapter 5, verses 18 and 19, progressives hate this argument. Verse 19, you address one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs, singing and making melody in your heart with the Lord. We have long made the argument, and rightly so. There's the command. The progressives say, well, he doesn't say you can't use the instrument. Where does he say you can't use the argument? He never does that. He never says you can't use the argument, the instrument, just like he never said the angels aren't my son, and just like he never said Judah can't be priest. The Hebrews writer makes an argument based upon the silence of Scripture. There is a strong affirmation. You are my son. And everything else in Hebrews chapter 1. You are this. The whole argument of the book of Hebrews is predicated upon the fact that you are my son. You are the firstborn. Your scepter endures forever. And he never said that to anybody else. You, Levitical tribe through the sons of Aaron, are the priest. Never said that about anybody else. Same argument. Here's the command. That's what it says. Colossians 3 says the same thing. James 5 says the same thing. You don't have to have the negative command. We are not trying to figure out everything God did not say. We're doing what God authorizes. Okay? Different topic for another day, but right there. So, all right, let me see who's got any more comments over here. But that's Hebrews 1. We're going to be, reason I'm Tuesday when we come back to it, I'll spend a little bit more time because I did get off on some other stuff today. I'll spend a little more time on this, a little bit, but we pick up right back in the same place. We kind of get into to the point of the argument in the first paragraph of chapter 2. We already talked about it a good deal. We'll talk about it more thoroughly from verse 2 down to about verse 6 or so of chapter 2 before he starts to move to the connect. First, you start with Jesus' connection to angels, and then by the end of chapter 2, you're transitioning into Jesus' connection to us, which goes through really chapter 3 all the way into chapter 4. Okay. So that's what we'll try to get to is chapter 2, verse 1 down to about verse 6 or so on Tuesday. Okay. But that's where we'll be. All right. Let me see what else we got over here. Um, Ronald said, I'm associated with East Main Church of Christ, Murfreesboro. Average 400 on Sunday, 300 on Sunday night. That's a pretty good number. 75% is a pretty good number. I know that congregation. Why do I know that congregation? I probably attended there because I've been to Murfreesboro before. I know that congregation. I know that congregation. All right. Travis is here. Hey, Travis, good to see you this morning. Simple thing. That's what I'm looking for. Having a hard time. Everyone wants to be so big they have to wear name tags and split into groups to get to know each other. It's funny. I know a church. I'm very familiar with a church, not Rockledge, that just started. I think it was Sunday. I think it was 3 days ago, 4 days ago, whatever Sunday was, giving their members name tags. I'm not sure it went over that well. But they did it. So nothing wrong with a name tag. They annoy the snot out of me, but nothing wrong with them. Congregations used to help each other out. If one outgrew, some members would move to a smaller congregation to help them out. Now it's build bigger and they will come. Yeah. Now that's a balancing act, Travis. That's a good point. We used to do that. We did used to do that. It was just when I was preaching in Katy, Texas. Um, it was always in the mind of one of our elders. He passed not long after I started working there. There was a city. Katy's a big suburb of Houston, and down south of them, a city called Fulshire, which did not have a Church of Christ in it, but it was you could just see it. It was primed for growth, and the auditorium in Katy would hold 700. And the idea was whenever we got up to X number of people, that's what we would do is we would take a church off or a group off because we had people coming up from Fulshire and start a church down there in Fulshire. Now other stuff happened, and that didn't go exactly the way they were planning. But guess what? Some of the members from Katy ended up in Fulshire planting a church down there, and there's a big enough gap and enough people that it made perfect sense to do it. Okay, I would question the methodology by which they did it, another topic for another day, but it still happened. And I think that's a good point there, Travis, is that, you know, if the geographic ramifications are there and you need to do it, yeah. The concept I started talking about earlier about church planting, we need to do more church planting. We absolutely need to do more church planting. I just have questions. Usually when it comes out of the progressive mind and you know they're doctrinally progressive, get suspicious in a hurry because I know what you're trying to do. I know what you're trying to do. Um, and on the other hand, this is where you kind of have a good balance here. Um, you know, our building holds, like I said earlier. If Andy's still there, you told me just the other day. I don't know how many we have, but I think we have like right at 200. I think we have right at 200 seats in our auditorium. We don't have pews. We have the seats that link together. We've got those. Okay. In the past, I think we've run maybe 220 seats pre-COVID. I think we're running maybe 220, something like that. But if you squeezed us into our room as tight as you could, 220, 240 is about as many as you can get. But that's still what our building looks like. What you can't see would be like right over here on that picture is we have another 5 acres of just open grassland. And at the end of that, which would be like right here, the busiest road running through Rockledge, Florida, it has become the busiest. US 1 used to be the busiest. Well, US 1 might still be the busiest, but
Fisk Boulevard is what it is. That's the street we're on. It's the most important road right now, north south one at least in Rockledge, and we're right on it. So if we get back to the 200 range, we have the facilities. We've got a great location. I'm not going to argue for a church plant because there are already other congregations in this area, and we have the facilities. We have a great location, and we have the space. My argument would be let's expand the auditorium because Rockledge has grown numerically because we're right down the road from the Cape. SpaceX is right. I mean, that's a lot of our young people who are coming in now work for SpaceX or Blue Origin or something like that. Or we've got some young people who, well, used to work over at Patrick Space Force Base. Okay, that's the industry around here, and we are benefiting from it, and I think we'll benefit from it for a lot of years to come. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is you God gave us a brain. Use the brain properly. All right, just make those choices. Um, Travis said also looking for a preacher that digs into the word, not just 20-minute gloss over. Yeah, yeah, that would be good. Be good. Hey, Debbie from Houston Park Church of Christ in Selma, Alabama. Well, good to have you with us, Debbie. Ronald says, why not merge? With whom? I don't. I mean, merging can help. Um, Sometimes it's not great either. Um, I mean, we are a predominantly white church here at Rockledge, but we have a good number of black members. We're not. We are probably at this point about demographically proper because other than Spanish language, because we are in Florida, so you got Spanish speakers. The problem is it's Spanish language. That's hard to merge into your Sunday morning assembly because they're speaking Spanish. Although we do have some Hispanic people. My son-in-law is one of them. He's born in Venezuela. Um, Speaks pretty good Spanish, I hear. Um, but demographically, we're about right in terms of, especially when you just go with the white and black populations. We're English speaking white and black. It's about 80-20 probably here. It's something like that in Brevard County, and our population is probably pretty close to that. But about 2.5 miles right up the road, it's a smaller congregation. I don't know what they're running right now. Probably 50 or 60 on a Sunday morning. A good Sunday's probably in the 50-60 range, I guess. Predominantly black church. Um, yeah, it's predominantly black. They're more heavily black. That they're probably 85-90% black would be my guess. I don't know, but they're preaching. We go eat breakfast together sometimes. When I say sometimes, at least once a month we get together and go eat together. We do joint worship services together. We share each other's buildings. uh, they run a sunrise service. Sometimes our people who need to go will go to their sunrise service. Um, but then they don't have a Sunday night service. So some of their members who work like shift work come to our services on Sunday night to take the Lord's Supper and to worship. So we great relationship with each other. Point them doctrinally in the same place, but why not merge? Because this building's been here for 50 years. Their building's been there for 50 some odd years, and they have married and buried and baptized all their people up there, and we've married and buried and baptized all of our people down here. There are two workable, viable congregations, and we're far enough apart that I mean, do they still have I think they still have a Rockledge address, but they're essentially in Cocoa. If there's, that's got to, they still have to have a Rockledge address. They're on Fisk Boulevard. I've never looked it up. It's got to be a Rockledge address, but it could be Cocoa because it's like 6 minutes or you're a good 7 iron from hitting Cocoa. Okay, they're even though they're about 3 miles apart from us, they're effectively in a different community. So having two buildings there works. There's no reason to merge. So merge when it makes sense, but for us, it doesn't make sense. They have a history. We have a history. We get along great. We work with each other, but there's a history there. So live with it. Okay. Now, if something happened and we diminished or they diminished, might be a really good idea to do it then. But as of right now, both congregations are viable. Both congregations are sound. Both congregations have good preachers. It's a little self-serving, but I don't know how else to say that. Both congregations and good elderships. Both congregations have good elderships. Why stir the boat? Okay. Anyway, what else we got going on? Um, oh, we got somebody looking for money. Sorry, John. Um, we do not. If I have a pretty well established thought that I would encourage you to go find the Church of Christ in your area. Um, if you tell us what area you're in, that might be something. We could start there, but we don't give money out online. We're certainly not going to start giving money out on PayPal online. That is a bad idea to start with. So I don't mean to not accusing you of anything or anything like that, but no, we're not handing out money on online. Like just that's sorry, that's the world we live in. That there's not a good idea that comes from that. So, but if you tell us the city you're in, something like that, we can probably set you up with somebody that can meet with you because that's what you need. There's a member there. If you're anywhere near a congregation of the Church of Christ, somebody will help you. No, that's what I'd ask you to do. Um, yep, Travis, I think that's right. We absolutely be able to share with each other. So, and if and by the way, if somebody here at Rockledge or somebody up there at the Fisk Boulevard congregation, if that conversation came up and said, hey, why don't we merge? If we wanted to explore it, I'd be all for it. Yeah, let's do it. That's great because you know their building is smaller than ours, so I think technically we would have to do it down here. But even if we added their members into our assembly, we would immediately start to have a conversation about our build. We don't have enough classrooms. Our fellowship hall is not big enough. The auditorium. We'd start to having that conversation. So I don't know that that would make any sense. Why would we do that and spend a lot of money expanding the building here unless they had a need for it? But if somebody brought it up and said, "Hey, let's do it," that's great. Let's do it. Okay. So anyway, I'll stop there. Appreciate the class today. We got off on some other stuff other than Hebrews. I hope you did find something. And like I said, we'll be back here on Tuesday, and we'll be starting right there at the start of chapter 2. And I kind of skimmed over those last few verses a little bit, but we'll hit them again. We will hit them again as we introduce chapter 2, because as I said just a few minutes ago, that argument does kind of wrap itself up. Well, the argument wrapped itself up. The application, the point of the argument manifests itself here in chapter 2. So I'm going to have a hard time talking about that without going back at least a little bit into chapter 1. So we'll get back to that material as we have the opportunity there, Lord willing, on Tuesday. Until then, as always, it's my prayer that you'll go out, make your day a great one for God.